Hello and welcome to another update. In this one, we'll be updating around the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts. So starting out in the Donetsk front around the Bakhmut area, we see that there are two updates. The first one is that Russia has started an offensive towards Kordyomivka. So they are attacking the outskirts of the city as well as the village of Silniopilia, which is right at the outskirts connected to it. So these two villages are under attack by the Russian forces. Moving further north, the Russians have restarted their attack towards Opitne and are trying to get a breakthrough in this village. And there's some fighting at the outskirts of the Bakhmut city here to the east, as well as around Soledar and Bakhmutske. Now, if we take a look at the Rybar mapping, they have also reported on something else which is interesting, and that is that the Ukrainians are planning a defensive line around Jezhev Yar and Konstantinivka in case they lose Bakhmut. So the front line would look somewhere around this, where they will have a defensive line by Konstantinivka, Jezhev Yar, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk, and they will have to connect this somehow with Siversk. Now, losing Bakhmut will force them to abandon Siversk. That is because there's no main road that they can use to transport from Siversk to other areas. There's the river to the north, and there's Bakhmut, which would have been taken to the south. So, in case of a Russian breakthrough around Bakhmut, the Ukrainians will have to fall back from Soledar as well as Siversk and leaving these positions to then fall back to Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, and Jezhev Yar. Moving on to the north around the Luhansk front, we see that the Ukrainians are attempting an attack offensive around the area of Nevske, and they are trying to make a breakthrough. There's also been some supply runs being spotted around the north of Liman. Looking at the Rybar mapping, we see here that the Ukrainians have been transporting ammunition as well as troops to the front line, and then the Russians had spotted it and have started shelling it. Other than that, there's a lot of shelling from both sides around the front line, and there is more transport of troops to the front line by the Ukrainian side. This indicates that the Ukrainians are either intending to hold the line or planning an offensive on this front line. Looking at it from a large-scale perspective, we see that it is a very wide front and it's all flat lands. There's this small river that the Russians have established a defensive position from. It is very inferior to the defensive line we see here between Kreminna and Svatove. This means that eventually, if the Ukrainians decide to launch an offensive, most likely the Russians will fall back to this defensive line between Kreminna and Svatove. They'll try to hold this road, but essentially their defensive position will be vulnerable if they hold the road. So from a strategic perspective, they'll be able to resupply Svatove from the east, but Kreminna will be more difficult to hold, but with Lysychansk under their control, they'll have a much easier time. So most likely we will see some kind of abandonment of this road between Svatove and Kreminna. However, they will hold the river line as a defensive position, which is why we're seeing them preparing defenses here by the Kreminna-Svatove line. So this buffer zone here is to prepare the supplies before the road is cut, as well as preparing the defenses in this line, so that they're able to hold it. This further indicates that they are not planning on making any offensives or counteroffensives to the Ukrainian offensives here in this area. They are rather planning to conduct an offensive somewhere else, most likely the Belarus area, as we see that they are building defenses, and this isn't just any defenses, but this is long-term defenses similar to what we saw Ukrainians build prior to the war, as well as now to the north of Kharkiv. So their plan is for until then to hold their lines and prevent any Ukrainian breakthrough here in the north as well as the south, while they're trying to keep advancing around the Donetsk area. You may be asking, why would they not just hold the line at Donetsk as well? That is because Donetsk is a frontline city and they want to stop the shelling of the city. They'll need to take Avdiivka as well as Marinka. This will create a buffer zone between Donetsk and the Ukrainian front. Finally, in other news, the Pentagon have confirmed that active duty US troops are deployed inside Ukraine. Officially, their mission is to on-site inspections to assess weapon stocks of the Ukrainian army. However, Sending troops to Ukraine, regardless of what their mission is very, very weird in this stage of the conflict. First of all, they are 8 months into the conflict. Why do they suddenly need to do it now? And other than that, there is the fact that Russia could strike one of these positions. In that case, they have struck US Army personnel. That could bring direct conflict between Russia and NATO. It would at the very least give the United States an excuse to conduct military operations against Russia. That's it for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.